All right, guys, prepare yourself. We are about to take a look at all of the different user interface elements with 3ds Max. And the most obvious place to start is with the viewports.
Dun, dun, dun.
When you first start, Max, you've got these large window-like areas.
Oh, yeah, windows.
That they're really kind of like monitor displays into your virtual world in which you will be creating your 3D scenes.
A window into your world.
Yeah, so we've got 4 windows. Bill, would you like to talk a little bit more about these viewports?
Absolutely. Well, the default viewports that you see in Max when you first open it up are shown here. You've got top, front, left, and perspective.
And you can tell this by looking in the upper left-hand corner.
Yep.
Just in case anyone happened to miss that, there is some text that will indicate what viewport you're looking through.
Right. And interesting, now that you talk about viewports, let's talk about the fact that you have an active viewport.
I like it.
Yep. You see this little yellow border going around here. This is the actual active viewport. This is the one that you have access into manipulating and moving around.
That's right. So if you click on, let's say, the top viewport, people will notice that it will become active.
Right. Now I'm going to right-click on it. And now it gets the yellow border, and now it becomes active.
But now is right-click the only way to activate it?
It is not. You can also left-click.
But that could be bad. Why could that be bad?
That could be interesting, because if you left-click and you keep moving a little bit...
You could do that.
Right.
You could deselect something that was selected you didn't want to deselect.
Yep.
Yeah, so generally right-clicking is a really good approach in switching active viewports.
Right. And if you notice here that the perspective viewport looks different from the other 3.
It does.
We have 2 types of viewports.
Yes, we have the orthogonal viewports.
Ooh,
here's a nickel.
Yeah, you can win at Scrabble with that one.
And you have the perspective viewport. Top, front, and left. Sort of like you're looking directly on at your scene, kind of like at a 90-degree angle, if you know.
True. And then I take it a step further. Your orthogonal views, that's your 2D views.
That's right. They have no depth.
Your non-objective views because depth has been removed.
Yes.
There's a way you can actually visualize this without using your computer. If you were to take one of your hands, like let's say you take your right hand and put it really close to your face. Now take your left hand and put it, like extend your arm way out before. So now you can see both your hands. One's out in the distance, one's really close. One hand will look bigger than the other. That's due to perspective, depth.
Right.
Yes.
Now the perspective viewport works that way. If you have one object that is closer to the camera, it will appear larger than objects that are further away from the camera. In the orthogonal views, that is not the case.
Right.
You can have one object that is very near the camera and one that is miles and miles away, but if they are the same size, they will still appear the same size, because objects do not get smaller as they move away.
Right.
And with that analogy, let's add something else. Everybody's familiar with what railroad tracks look like.
Yeah.
If you were to stand on railroad tracks, and if they were to go off as far as you can see,
They go to a point.
they go to
single
a point.
point.
That's
Yep.
right. They come together. And that's exactly what would happen in our perspective viewport if we were to create a set of railroad tracks.
Sure.
In our orthogonal views, top, front, left, etc., what we're going to see are 2 railroad tracks that just stay perfectly parallel, never coming together to a point. They just stay parallel forever.
Right. Now I'm going to do something a little crazy here. I'm going to create a few primitive objects just to demonstrate our example. You guys don't have to follow along. I know I'm jumping ahead, but I just for example's sake. Now, if you notice here, one of them appears to be a lot bigger than the other in the perspective
No, I love
view.
this one. You can also, if you were to scale that one down a little bit, then zoom in on it really, it's like, whoa, it's really big, but it's not. It's really big. But you get the idea.
Yeah.
So, you know, sometimes, and I've seen a lot of students fall victim to this in the past, you could be working with an object and you may think that it's in one location, or you may think that it's a particular size and be totally wrong because you're dealing with a perspective view.
Right.
And this is when you're going to quickly find out how important it is to have both types of views, because if you only work in perspective and you're new to working with 3D apps, you're going to find yourself having a hard time.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's important.
And I've just found in my experience that it boils down to 2 mindsets. The more artistic users will find themselves working in perspective views quite often, and the more mechanical engineering type people will find themselves working in orthographics a lot more.
And there's actually a third one we'll add.
Is there?
Yep. And your beginners, for some reason, find themselves working in perspective and the user view.
Oh, no. Well, let's talk about that in a minute.
We have to mention it. No, we got to mention it real quick, because
That hurts my head.
It is one more type of view. And now we've seen perspective.
That's true.
We have seen our 2D views, or orthogonal views. Now, what I won't be able to do, I know we have not talked about navigation. We're going to talk about navigation controls in just a second, but go ahead and give us a user view.
Okay.
What he's going to do is rotate in this orthogonal view. Ooh, look at that. notice in the upper left-hand corner, instead of saying front, it now says user. Now
It's
check it
interesting
out.
because the grid, it kind of stays the same.
Yeah, the lines stay parallel.
Yeah.
They're not
They don't converge.
converging.
Right.
You're stealing my words. They're not coming together to a point. We now have what can easily be mistaken by a beginner as a perspective view, but it's not. It's still an orthogonal view.
Right.
And this is dangerous.
And you could tell it's orthogonal because the objects are still the same size.
Absolutely. This is
perspective
dangerous.
view. You could see the difference in size here.
Now, as you gain experience working with 3D scenes, you may find yourself, for whatever crazy reason, using a user view.
Every now and then, I have put one to good use.
I've used this for doing logo work in the past,
Sure.
where things they didn't need any sort of perspective.
They
on
need
them.
false depth.
That's right, and this is great for stuff like that. But as a beginner to 3ds Max, do not create a user view. It is not a smart idea.
And if you create one and you want to get it back, what you can do is you right-click on the word user,
okay,
and this brings up a little menu with our list of possible views inside of it. So now we could go back and change this back to a front view, and all is good again.
It's that simple. Okay, so there's your 3 types of views. They really do break down into just a 3D view and a 2D view. It's as simple as that. All right, what else are we going to talk about?
Let's talk about how to manipulate our viewports.
Okay, that's pretty
How do we
important.
move things around? Well, one way to do it that is very key is to use the middle mouse button.
Okay.
And I like to use this a lot. If you hold down the middle mouse button and you drag with the mouse, you will pan around your scene.
Okay.
Now, if you want to zoom in and out of your scene, you could use the scroll wheel on the middle mouse button, kind of zoom in and out. And now, let's say you want to rotate around an object in your scene. You hold down Alt and then hold down the middle mouse button, and now you can rotate.
Okay. Cool.
Of course, the ability to do these things are also provided to you in button form as well, so that you don't have to know hotkey combinations or, if you don't have a middle mouse button on your mouse, which is a possibility. And you'll find the navigation controls located in the lower right-hand corner of your user interface.
That is correct. So if you want to zoom, you can hit the zoom button, doing the same zoom functionality. No, it's a little bit smoother than when you use the middle mouse button.
It is.
And then you have pan as well. And then you have rotate.
Okay, so it's as simple as that. Now, there's a few things down here that are quite handy. Let's go ahead and start with the simplest one. We can go ahead and do this one right here.
Active viewport, maximize viewport toggle.
Yeah,
Yep.
So you may find yourself in a situation where you need as much screen real estate space as possible looking into your virtual world.
Sure.
And this is how you can go about doing that.
And there's a hotkey for that as well. It is Alt-W. So this is toggling your maximize viewport. Very handy.
And again, whatever viewport is your active viewport, as Bill just made the front view active, that is the one that will toggle.
Yes.
You can start seeing for the very first time right now why knowing what the active viewport is can be important.
Absolutely.
Now we've got a few more things down here as well that are handy. And this is if you want to zoom all 4 views at one time.
Sweet. Zoom all. Oh, yeah.
And so that'll give you all of them.
Yep.
And then framing things up. Ooh.
Yeah.
Zach, how important is that?
Well, it depends on how apt you are to get lost in your viewports. But there are times when you'll want to focus your camera in on a specific object, perhaps make it the center of interest for your camera so that as you're rotating around, that object will stay in the center of your view at all times.
Right.
And this is where framing is going to become vital to you. Which,
and it's called Zoom Extents in 3ds Max, but it is basically framing up. And we can frame up all, and we can frame up selection. As a matter of fact, if you guys look in the bottom right-hand corner, it has a flyout.
Yep.
So now we have 2 different things, and continuing to use the things that Bill has been talking about. Remember over here, we can get a little bit of information. When I click on this and we come up, we can see Zoom Extents the selected object, or Zoom Extents, and they don't say it, but all objects.
Right now, all you're doing is holding down the left-hand mouse button to get that flyout.
That's right. Now, if I wanted to, I could come up here and say, at the moment, but if we were to, man, I'm so
Where'd
lost.
it go?
So right now, I can just do Zoom Extents, which is, boom, the entire scene.
Right.
Now, as Zach was saying a second ago, maybe, now I'm going to use that fancy middle mouse wheel, maybe I need to Zoom Extents on just this one. Now I can come over here to my flyout, switch it, boom, and look at that. Now it's only zoomed up on this one. So if there were other objects outside the area right here of viewing provided by this viewport, you wouldn't see them. I mean, it's irrelevant. It's just going to zoom up the selected object.
Right. And
So,
I'm sorry, I was going to say, the cool thing about doing this is that now that sphere is the center of interest for your camera.
that's true. I'm going to switch over to this, and with that guy, same thing. Boom, notice that's who's jumped in there. And what Zach is talking about in regards to the center of interest for the camera is that when you're tumbling or rotating around your view, by default you come in and you're doing that around the center of the world. But then as things progress throughout the day and you're working and you're changing focus and you're doing all sorts of crazy things, it's going to change.
Exactly.
Right. And the hotkey for doing a zoom extent selected is Z.
Right. So by zooming an extent, in this particular case, in this object, now you'll notice Bill is rotating around that particular object.
Great way to put focus on some place that you're working so that you can get fine-tuning right down in one level.
Correct.
Okay, so that one's kind of an important one. And adding to that, over to the right, we do have the ability to do zoom extents all on all viewports. Right now, notice how we're looking at only one sphere, but here we see two. So I could say, let's do that for all viewports. So boom. Or we could come in here, and now remember, when we're looking right down the axes, they're going to be the same size because this is an orthogonal view.
Right.
Or we can come in here and we can say, let's do that for just the selected object. So again, anytime you see the four little viewports here, you know that you're affecting all of the viewports.
Gotcha.
So just keep in mind that you got fly out, fly out. You do have a fly out down here as well, where you start dealing with sub-objects, which is something we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But this is all rotation type stuff. And then same thing when we start working with our panning. And then over here we have another type of zoom, if you will.
This is a field of view. This is more like zooming a real camera.
Yeah, this is another, in my opinion, dangerous thing for beginners. Because this isn't a zoom. It really is zooming your camera.
Right. Well, it's like I don't want to try to confuse things any more than they may have been already, for sure. But the standard zoom tool that we've already demonstrated is actually
like a dolly.
It's like or trucking your camera into and out of. Like if you had the camera on your shoulder,
and
it's like
walk
actually
closer.
walk closer to your object or walk away from your object.
Precisely.
This, on the other hand, is like grabbing the lens on your camera and rotating it like you're actually zooming in. You sit still, you zoom in on the object. It's changing the field of view of the camera, actually working with the lenses. This can be dangerous, though, because you're changing the perspective.
Yeah. That's the key thing.
The more you zoom out, the deeper your perspectives will get. The more you zoom in, the more you kind of start to lose perspective.
But so you can get things like wide-angle looks.
You can get that Hitchcock effect where you fly away but zoom in at the same time.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about customizing our viewport layouts a little bit. Let's say we want the
Zach, I think Bill was getting tired of us.
I think he was.
Not at all.
That was like a shut up cue. That's okay, though.
But that does wrap up the navigational control icons located in the bottom right-hand corner. But generally, you'll find that Bill and us, that being Zach and I, will use our hotkeys and the middle mouse button as well.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so now let's go ahead and start talking about the other things we can do with our viewports.
Right, let's talk about customizing the layouts. Let's say we want to resize our viewports because maybe we want to have a little bit bigger perspective viewport and we want to minimize the other ones. You could actually go here, click and drag as it turns into arrows, and now you have this flexibility.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very cool. But wait a minute, hang on. What if I get like all this messed up and changed and I want to get it exactly right back where it was before?
And you don't exactly know where the center is.
Yeah, I can't see it.
Right. Well, okay, what you do is you right-click on one of the words in one of the viewports here, and you could go down to, go down to Configure. And now you could go down to Layout, and now you have all your default layouts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Very
let's
cool.
say let's go back to here, click on this one, hit OK, the 4-view, and my bad.
And we've got our 4-view. Go ahead, Zach.
What some of you, I use a lot of 3D apps, so I might be getting Max confused with anything else, but you can just right-click
That's what I was
right in between them, and you can choose Reset Layout, and that'll put it right back to a 4-view.
Do you know what was cool there?
What's that?
I was thinking to myself, wow, Bill's going to show me something I haven't seen.
I was thinking the same thing. I was like, wow, I didn't know about this way to do it. But actually, Bill knew it too. He just had a brain cramp.
My bad.
There are other applications out there, 3D applications, that will allow you to manipulate your view like this. This is a problem with us knowing different applications.
Yeah.
That
navigation syndrome.
If you right-click in the center like that, you will not get a menu pop out that's going to allow you to reset it back.
For a moment there, I couldn't remember if Max allows you to do that or not.
No, I knew Max did.
Yeah.
But when Bill went over for the context menu, I was like,
I didn't know Max could do that.
I thought, cool.
See, what I wanted to do is I wanted to lead into the next thing we're going to talk about is customizing our viewport layouts.
Segway.
Yes. Let's say, we don't want the 4-view. Let's say we want, a 2-view. Well, that's like I said, you go into Configuration, And click on here. Now you're going to have the top here and the front here.
Mm-hmm. Aha.
Ooh, very cool.
And again, this is something that you'll find can definitely become handy in the future when you've learned a lot more about scene creation.
Sure.
And you need particular layouts that facilitate quicker creation or to allow you to work with what you're doing in an easier way.
That's right.
That's correct.
Also a good way to, monopolize your real estate space more efficiently. You know maybe you just need a perspective view and a top view to get the scene lined up exactly the way you need it.
That's
so
right.
why show anything else?
Agreed.
Why waste screen space?
Agreed.
And the last thing we actually want to talk about here, real quick, are the world space tripods. And these are these little, look like little coordinate references down here. Mm-hmm. These basically tell you where you are positioned in world space. Basically, right now you can see that Y is pointing up, X to the left, and Z is going into the screen. If you do a little manipulation, you could see how it's actually rotating in real time. Just giving you, a quick reference on where your orientation is.
Okay, very cool.
All right, now, look at our objects. We're looking at objects in wireframe right now.
Yep.
So what if I want to see them in different ways? I want them presented as in, smooth shading with highlights, or basically we have the ability to control how we're going to see our geometry in each of these viewports, not only the perspective, but also the orthogonal views. Can you talk a little bit about that, Bill?
Sure, absolutely. Right now we are in wireframe mode only. Let's say we want to go into a shaded view. We want to sort of color in this wireframe. You can do it in two ways. You can do it with a hotkey, or you can actually do it by right-clicking on the viewport menu, and then you can select here from different options, smooth and highlights. There you go.
Cool.
Now, when you have smooth and highlights turned on, you could actually bring the wireframe back and kind of lay it onto your smooth object.
Which is handy
yes,
modeling.
And that is edged faces.
Nice.
Yeah, that's very helpful.
So now it's smooth, and you can still see the wireframes that are present as well.
Okay.
Now, to do this with a hotkey, use F3 to toggle between wireframe mode and smooth mode, and then you use F4 to turn on edge faces or turn it back off again.
Excellent.
It's almost like a wireframe on shaded kind of mode.
Yes.
Interesting.
Good point. Very contemplative there.
Yeah, anyways.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, what else do we have up under there? Got to be more stuff.
Well,
there we
go. The menu here, yeah. We can talk about safe frames.
What do we have up under other? Look at that. We have all sorts of things. We want to see things smoothly, not smooth. We want to see facets with highlights, without highlights. I actually did this earlier with a sphere when I was just going through properties real quick. Remember how I made the sphere not look smooth, but instead had all of the
Wasn't that in another video?
Yeah, no, that's what I said, in another video.
Okay.
Right. Which was still a few minutes ago to us, because it's all been
you.
happening in the same day.
Yeah. I think that video's in the future.
Oh, yeah, it probably is. Because there's a lot of people from 3D Buzz knows we record in different orders.
Yes.
So we have more...
all this and more coming soon from 3D Buzz.
All right, we have all sorts of different ways, and that is coming soon. But here is the most important thing I wanted to show why I wanted Bill to go to other. You have bounding box. And if, unfortunately, you're having to be working with 3dsmax on a computer that's super slow...
Yep.
You may find that working with bounding boxes will help ease the pain.
Right, absolutely.
If you have a 1998 graphics card with 1 meg of RAM, that's just bad.
Yeah.
You may find that the only way you can work is
But
with
if you
this.
do.
But this allows us to see the volume that the geometry is taking up.
Sure.
And this is really helpful. If, let's say, you want to do a lot of camera manipulation and get a particular view in there, and then switch everything back over to a wireframe.
If you have maybe thousands and thousands of assets in your scene.
Precisely.
There's even a mode where you can tell the viewport to switch over to bounding boxes as you rotate.
That
is true. This would be adaptive degradation.
There you go.
I always know it as the O key.
The O key, right. Which is C.
And so there, as you go to start manipulating your viewport by rotating around, you'll notice that everything automatically converts over to a bounding box.
In an adaptive sense, you might say. Now, if I hit O, that actually turns that back off, and now we're back to our standard method.
Very cool. But nowadays, we deal with fancy computers, fast graphic cards, etc. We pretty much just leave it off.
Yep.
I usually end up hitting it by accident for whatever reason. I'm like, everything's changing when I rotate.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and right-click again and bring that context menu back up. Sure. See what else we have up underneath there. Anything else we'd like to talk about?
Back under Other, we have lit wireframes. I love that one.
So, okay.
Because that gives you a wireframe that actually shows you shading I just think it's fancy.
It is pretty cool.
And it goes from purple to black. How awesome is that? But okay, moving on.
So the bottom line is right there, we're just showing you guys the different things that you can use for controlling how your geometry, there's the faceted that you're going to see in the future.
Yep.
Different things that you are able to use to show, to make your geometry show in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm hitting F4 again to turn on Wireframe unshaded.
Okay. But there's other things up under there as well. We saw at the very beginning we have views. This was not really addressed heavily here, but Bill talked about it a second ago when we switched back to a front view from a user view.
Right.
But just to kind of hit everything here in a more organized fashion,
a lot of views there.
Allows us to take any active viewport or any viewport that we're right-clicking on the text and switch that viewport over to anything that's listed here. Which could be
not even necessarily viewports.
Exactly, I was about to say, which could be a user perspective, front, back, etc., but also things like active shade, schematic, grid, extended. I mean, we've got all sorts of things that we can use. Up underneath that, the next category in the context menu that you see is the different ways that we can control the way our geometry is displayed with smooth highlights, wireframe, etc. Up underneath that, do we want to show the grid or not show the grid? So, grid went bye-bye.
Yep. There's a hotkey for that as well.
Oh, is there?
It is G.
Wow, that's a complicated one.
Yeah.
I always spell grid with an R. Okay, so that takes the grid on and off. Just kidding, Zach. It's all good.
Sorry.
And then we have the ability to show the background and show safe frames, just if we have background imagery brought in there. And then safe frames is if we're working for NTSC and we need to really be cautious with, that's being bled outside of what would be seen on a television.
Actually, there's a really good example of this, and 4 people will get it because I'm sure only 4 other people saw this movie, but I was conned into going to see The Hills Have Eyes a little while back.
Oh, boy.
The remake of it. And at the very beginning of the movie, they've got the text, the director and whatnot, but they put it just outside the frame. So it actually bleeds down onto the curtains in the movie theater, and there are parts of it you just can't read.
Wow. They had show safe frame turned on.
That's right. Apparently they forgot about that, but these boxes will show you where you can place things in your scene to make sure they're visible.
Interesting thing, though, with a movie, with film, it's not really a big deal.
Right. Because you can always adjust the lenses.
They just did some crazy stuff there. But when you are working with television, working with NTSC, you do lose a percentage off the top, left, right, and bottom. And if you're not paying attention to that, because when we hit render right now, you're going to render out what you see in that perspective view.
Yep.
If you take that for film, that's fine. If you take that for television, all of a sudden, in this particular case, on an older TV, notice the left sphere that's not selected right now, that's just kind of sitting over on the left side of the perspective viewport.
You'll probably lose it all.
You'll probably lose just about all of that.
Yeah.
Yep. See, look at that.
There's a good chance you'd lose the whole thing.
Now, of course, when we start working with safe frames, we've got safe frames, we get into safe title, we got safe action, etc. And these are things we'll address a little bit more later. But the idea is to help provide some sort of visual guideline as to where to keep text, geometry, action, etc. that needs to be on the screen for sure when you're working for video as your final medium. Okay, moving right along from there, that moves us down into some viewport clipping, texture correction, and disable view. Let's see, anything specific? Go ahead and move the mouse down just a little bit, Bill, into, you can kill that. Down, there we go. So, up just a test. So this area right here, so viewport clipping. Zach, you want to talk a little bit about that? Well, basically it's just clipping. If we want to control clipping on, we get a minimum and a maximum on what we want to cut out. Just if we're dealing with a very complicated scene and we got a lot of dense stuff in the background, we want to bring our far clipping plane a little bit closer so that gets cut out.
Slicing out near and far aspects.
Right. Precisely. Great way to kind of chop out things. Like if you have a very dense scene, get rid of the stuff that's far in the distance.
Exactly. My bad. Just there, I'm talking so much I felt bad, and I just caught Zach off guard by just literally throwing it at him.
I was watching the fish again.
That's okay, but I jumped back in. So that's viewport clipping if you want the ability to control that yourself. Texture correction, just giving us a better algorithm for controlling texture placement on geometry when we're showing textures. We'll get into that more later when we start working with it.
Sure.
Of course, it does come with the expense of speed. And then the ability to disable a view as well. Moving down from there, if we want to undo whatever sort of, there you go, whatever sort of camera motion we did last, or camera navigation.
Just like hitting Shift-C.
So if we right-clicks again, you'll know now it's, we have the redo available, but now we can also undo viewport clipping. So, again, there's our little list of one thing at a time. And then finally, we have configure at the very bottom. Go ahead.
Big area.
Kaboom! We saw layouts a second ago, but we have just options like crazy.
A lot of things
in here.
But things that we've already kind of seen before, too.
Yeah, we have.
Yeah.
And let me see, is there anything in here that is absolutely important that we talk about at the moment, just scanning through? All right, so that's rendering method. That's good. And that's rendering method. Let's go back to rendering method for one second. That's rendering method for this viewport right here.
Right.
Okay, we're not talking about the final render of an image out through the rendering engine. We're talking about, may I see the mouse real quick?
Absolutely.
Each of these viewports are rendering the geometry out for you to see it in that viewport. And how are we going to render it out? In this case, for the perspective view, we are rendering it out smoothly. Again, render options, we can disable this view, we can disable textures for this view, etc. We have default lighting in Max. If we didn't have default lighting, we wouldn't even be able to see our geometry. If you don't believe me, take a ball into a black room and you tell me what color that ball is. You're not going to see it. So default lighting does exist in 3ds Max. We have the ability to come in there and tell it one light, two lights. So again, a bunch of control for rendering options. And then we can, of course, apply all this stuff to just the active viewport only, which is the default. Or do we want to do all viewports? So if we come in here and make a few settings, we could say do it to all viewports. And these settings would then influence how the rendering is occurring in all the viewports. So all of this is rendering methods for the viewports. Right. Moving over to layouts, what do we have? Different layout configurations, as Bill has already shown you, that we can put the different viewports in. Moving over there to safe frames. Remember when Zach and I were throwing fancy things out like action safe, title, we can have user safe. We have these different views that we can put in there for, again, giving ourselves visual guidelines as to what we need to stay within when creating content for a specific media.
Right, and this allows us to basically adjust the parameters of those guidelines.
That's right. Adaptive degradation. Ooh.
That's such a cool term.
It really is. AD. So using a little AD.
That sounds like something you get diagnosed with. I'm sorry, guys. I have adaptive degradation.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Help
you'll notice that we actually have a lot of control that we can set up when working with adaptive degradation so that, you may have a relatively fast computer. And you want certain things to simplify, but not as much as we could make it simplify. You get the ability to customize that stuff here.
Yeah.
And then finally, that brings us over here to regions as well.
Yep.
A little virtual viewport. And we're going to save this stuff for a little bit later on. But that pretty much takes us through the complete context menu that you get when you right-click on any of these guys up here. So with that, that's pretty much everything I think we need to talk about for an introduction to viewports. Again, as we progress our way through the videos for the UI for Max, the whole idea is to get you kind of familiar with what's going on.
Right. Viewport manipulation is key.
Hence the word kind of familiar. Yeah, if you walk out of this video knowing anything, make sure it is a basic understanding of what these guys down here do and how to rotate, to pan track, all that stuff, your view with your mouse.
Yeah, that is something I do always try to stress whenever I'm teaching a 3D class over any application. Remember that your screen that you're looking at is a two-dimensional surface. You're using it to look into a 3D scene. If you're not constantly rotating your perspective view, looking around, getting an idea, a feel for the 3D layout of your scene, it's very easy to fall into looking at it as a two-dimensional thing.
That's right.
So keep yourself up, keep your brain fresh, and keep moving around your scene.
That's definitely. So with that, that is going to wrap up this video on viewports. Thanks, guys.